Welcome to another episode of the Snap Fantasy Football Podcast, your weekly dose of news and advice that comes to your pocket every single Saturday. Holding it down, here we got Mack, Mark, Scott, and Landon. Enjoy today's show.
Welcome back, guys, to another episode of the Snap Fantasy Football Podcast. I am your host, Lando. Catch us on social medias. We are on Twitter at snap_fantasy. We're on Instagram at snap_fantasy. And if you have a second, do us a favor and like this video and send a comment on our topic today. That is Denzel Mims, New York Jets wide receiver out of Baylor. He was picked in the second round, the 27th pick of the second round. Do you think he's going to break out this year? Comment below if you think he will, and or if you think he's a bust. Do you think he's going to get overdrafted in dynasty leagues? But let me give you a little preamble about Denzel Mims. He is compared to, on Player Profiler, to Chris Godwin. That is pretty high praise. This guy ran a 4.3 840-yard dash, has a 115.6 speed score. This guy is fast. The Senior Bowl standout is a big man. He's 6'4 or 6'3, 207. He's always had that underdog mentality. His wide receivers he looked up to was Randy Moss, Dez Bryant, Julio Jones. Maybe this guy can actually live up to that in fantasy, but that is going to be the question. His favorite route is the slant, and he believes he isn't a true X receiver in the NFL. Me personally, I think he can complement Jameson Crowder in that offense perfectly. His biggest competition is going to be Perriman. So Perriman could maybe run those deep routes. Denzel could run the slant routes from the X spot. It's hard to say. For me, I don't know if I'm going to be drafting him in any redraft formats, but I think he could be a dynasty darling. Just might take a couple years. Scotty, what are your thoughts on Denzel? Do you have a similar stance to me, or is he just a bust?
Well, there's a lot to like about Denzel Mims. You touched on he's 6'3", 207 pounds. It's a pretty prototypical wide receiver build. But, much like my quarantine hair, the hype about that New York Jets offense feels like it's getting a bit out of control. Now, there's two ways to look at this, which gives this type of pick either a incredibly high ceiling or an incredibly basement-dwelling floor. And it really comes down to if you believe this is the year that Sam Darnold is able to stay healthy, avoid mono, and put a real offensive powerhouse season together. All the pieces are there, and if you're going to look at this on the upside, you've got a lot of guys that will demand attention in the secondary. You've got Chris Herndon, you've got Rashad Perriman, you've got Crowder in the slot, and now Mims. So ideally, secondaries aren't going to be able to just kind of laser focus in on Mims, who was famous for making some pretty great contested catches. My argument there is, with all those mouths to feed, I really don't think that Mims is going to come out and be a relevant fantasy player in 2020. So the downside to that as well is if you say there's too many mouths to feed in that offense, you're saying that anyone's getting fed. The other side to this is that much like Lev Bell's season last year, it could all be hype, and the Jets could be in for another disappointing year. And if you've drafted Mims at all high, then you're just going to be disappointed. It's also a lot harder to make a contested catch in the NFL in your rookie year than when you're in college. Mackenzie, what do you think?
It's interesting. I think when you say that there's too many mouths to feed, I think there's not enough mouths to feed in this offense. I mean, Le'Veon Bell is the guy that probably should eat into his workload the most. Just depends how much he's used out of the backfield. But let's think about this. Rashad Perriman really only got his time to shine when Chris Godwin went down. He was good in a limited sample size, but really outside of that, Rashad Perriman's done next to nothing in the NFL. Chris Herndon is someone that everyone's talked about. When Chris Herndon gets on the field, he's going to be amazing. We've yet to see that. Ryan Griffin was the only standout tight end on that team last year, and that was nothing to write home about. And then Jameson Crowder, he's had some good years as a possession receiver, but we haven't really seen him with Sam Darnold for a big period of time. So I think actually Denzel Mims has a very straight path to becoming a relevant option for this team. And I think that's why they drafted him in the second round. Notably, there's been some pretty good second-round players in the past couple years. I'll go through a few. Devontae Adams, Michael Thomas, DK Metcalf. I don't know if you guys have heard about these players. All second-round receivers, chips on their shoulders. They fell in the drafts for whatever reason, and teams got value on them. And I feel like Denzel Mims is that sleeper superstar that we could see out of this year's draft class. Things I like about him.
Devontae who?
Michael
Michael who?
What? Yeah, exactly.
DK who?
Yeah, exactly.
I haven't heard of any of these guys.
Come on. I'll say two things. Watching Denzel Mims tape, I know he ran a 4.4 40. Straight line speed, yeah, he might be fast. I just didn't see him get the separation that I would have liked. I don't know if it's his footwork that's a little bit sloppy, but he doesn't, like, his route running isn't as polished as I would like. However, he does make up for that with his contested catch rate. 48.8% contested catch rate, 20 catches on 41 contested catches last year. That was second in the nation among college players who saw over 100 targets. Denzel Mims is special. He has great body control, and he's a physical route runner. For the lack of footwork he has to create separation, he does so with his hands, kind of like a DeAndre Hopkins. So whether on the line of scrimmage or using a little bit of a stiff arm to create space downfield, he gets away with it. And man, he can catch the ball. He's got a big frame. I think he's going to be a really, really good option for Sam Darnold, and should see production with Robbie Anderson leaving. There's about 100 targets to make up in this wide receiver core. So that's kind of how I see Mims.
So if I may step in here, that fact you brought up about Robbie Anderson leaving actually leaves an unsettling gap on this offense for me. His end of season with Darnold, the chemistry they had was probably the high point of that offense. And I'm not hating on Sam Darnold here, but he did have a pitiful last season, even though he missed a lot of games because of his illness. But then when he was on the field, 19 touchdowns to 13 interceptions, just over 3,000 yards. And that was with a player like Robbie Anderson, who I think is a more impactful player than Denzel Mims will be. However, I agree with you. I'm glad you brought up the good about him, because he is a great contested ball catcher and he's a big guy. So no matter how bad a pass looks, there's always kind of that higher percentage that'll get hauled in with a player as strong as Mims is. But another problem I have with this offense is just when you look at this room of quote-unquote playmakers, you got Lev Bell, who's been kind of a bust, and they're going to be wanting to feed him and make him worth the money they pay him. They've got guys like Perriman, who they brought in to fill that gap behind Robbie Anderson. He, too, has had an injury history and flashed a little bit with the Buccaneers last year. And I think, that might be kind of his most valuable point. I'm not sure if he'll be able to shine as brightly as he did at that end of season with the Bucs. And I don't know. I don't really see it happening for this team. I think so many things have to go right in order for Denzel Mims to be relevant. You're right, Lando. Dynasty, long term, I could see it, because a few of these pieces are going to be moving away from the team, and he could just skyrocket to that number one wide receiver on this team. But in redraft, I don't think so. I think it's a bit of a waste this year. And if you're going to have any one of those Jets receivers, it's the reliable slot option, Jameson Crowder. So on a team where Pro Football Focus has them ranked as the 28th receiving core in the league, I just don't buy into it. Even with the division getting a little easier after Tom Brady's departure from the AFC East, I just don't see it happening for the Jets or for this wide receiver core. So I'm cold on Denzel Mims.
So here's one thing really quick to take into account. Sam Darnold in 13 games last year threw 441 pass attempts. That's about 34 per game on average. If you project that out over a full 16-game season of health, that's well over 550 pass attempts. That's going to be one of the higher passing offenses in the league in terms of attempts if you project it out that way. So you know what, there might not be a whole lot of strength within that receiving core, but Denzel Mims, when they run 3 wide receiver sets, is going to be a part of that. So I just think opportunity alone, he's worth a shot in redraft in like your 12th, 13th round. But dynasty, for sure, this guy is a talent. He has the frame and the skill set to be a viable option long term.
Well, let's not forget though. Can I mention, however, that the coaching in New York right now,
I was just about to say,
is bordering on the pitiful.
Well, if Adam Gase continues to be Adam Gase, he won't be in New York much longer.
Fair enough.
Lando, wrap it up here. What do you? Whose side are you taking? You taking mine? You taking Scotty and Mark's?
So I'm leaning that the difficult decisions you have to have, whether you're going to start this wide receiver, are going to be so tempting that he might just let you down. There's going to be receivers in this rookie class like Henry Ruggs, maybe Laviska Shenault, that you just want to hold to keep. You just want them on your roster so that they're keeper next year. Well, Denzel Mims is going to tempt you to start him. Perriman's going to go down. He's going to get a game with 10 targets. And then just in that typical Jets fashion, he's going to let you down. That's going to be maybe the struggle this year with Denzel Mims. You guys make a lot of really good points. I think the talent should shine there, and I think he has work to do. It's no secret that this guy has work to do on his game, but in the end, he could amount to being that next level Chris Godwin type. I think it just might take a few years. Now, if you're a Jets fan, if you're a Sam Darnold fan, and you think this is the year in the AFC East to take control and to beat the Patriots, to beat the Bills, maybe you got to jump on this Denzel Mims train and get him in your fantasy lineup. Personally, I'll take a shot on him in the 10th, 11th round if you're in a keeper league, but otherwise, I think I'm going to stay away and wait till he's a waiver wire ad on a bye week. So, if you aren't subscribed already, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Comment below. Are we crazy? Is he a must add in fantasy football? Maybe in the 6th, 7th round? Is he an every week starter? If you agree with us, hit that like button, and we'll see you next week.